We're 5 weeks into Path of Exile's 3.26 expansion, Secrets of the Atlas. And just like in any other league, the meta in terms of skill usage, ascendancy popularity, and which items are being used has developed over this time. We've seen Berserker go from the most played ascendancy by far in week 1 of the league at a staggering 22% share, to the 5th most played ascendancy 5 weeks in, with Volcanic Fissure of Snaking falling off at a similar rate. Now, I discussed one of the biggest factors for this shift in my previous video, and this is the fact that the Berserker Volcanic Fissure of Snaking setup presented not only one of the strongest builds for a league start scenario, but also one of the easiest to execute. But as good as this build is for league start, Berserker has some holes, particularly in its defenses. You see, Berserker can keep up offensively with some of the strongest builds in the game, but defensively it falls short. This is essentially baked into its design as an ascendancy, and even with the change to Divide Pain to provide a mini Defiance of Destiny type effect, it's simply not enough. The meta in terms of farming in the endgame is very much to do with being able to clear tier 16.5 and 17 maps, including the incredibly dangerous map modifiers that they present. And when you also factor in risk scarabs, that danger level rises even further, and you essentially need a build that can run as many of these map modifiers as possible, because you simply cannot predict which of these modifiers you'll need to engage with. But this is only part of the reason why Berserker has fallen off so sharply across the duration of 3.26. The other half of the story has to do with the emergence of a completely new meta-defining build. And I like to describe this as the stars aligning. This just doesn't happen very often in Path of Exile, where a bunch of new mechanics and interactions just come together perfectly and mesh to create not just a new build, but a build that is so good that the skill goes from literally 0% play rate on day 1 of the league to being the most popular skill in the league 5 weeks in at 9% of the share. And I am of course talking about Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice. So firstly, let's take a look at the skill in a bit more detail. Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice is the transfigured version of Forbidden Rite. Notably, it costs life, more on that a bit later on. Now this spell scales a bit differently to most, in that it has the portion of the skill that scales damage based on your maximum energy shield, at the cost of dealing a hit of chaos damage to yourself on use, based on a higher percentage of your maximum energy shield. This means that you can improve your damage by increasing your total energy shield, instead of going down the normal route of scaling gem levels to improve a spell's damage output. This is the first crucial point of success for Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice. Think of dominant builds in recent Path of Exile history, especially since the introduction of tier 17 maps in 3.24, and you'll likely think of Trickster and Ephemeral Edge. Now the Trickster does have a lot more going on, namely incredible recovery via energy shield leech, and the ability to ignore action speed modifiers with 1 step ahead. However, note how similar the typical Trickster setup is to Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice. Stack energy shield, scale defense and offense at the same time. This is an immediate benefit of the spell against most others that rely on more traditional gem level scaling. But this alone isn't enough, because self-casting spells have had a lot of issues for a long time, and this wasn't helped in patch 3.25 when the new base types were introduced and the defensive auras were nerfed to compensate for this change. This, combined with the loss of many of the damage taken as modifiers, really hit topside passive tree builds very hard. Builds that relied on using Grace or Determination, or even both, combined with Defiance Banner, which they also lost. Where these builds were really struggling then was defensively. You couldn't reasonably justify standing still to cast spells in any of the difficult content that Path of Exile's endgame presents, as in most cases it would just lead to dying very quickly. And this is where the first notable change for 3.26 comes into play. You see, the Occultist is by far the most played ascendancy for Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice at a massive 88% of the share of builds using this skill, and there's a good reason for that. Obviously, the Occultist is very proficient at dealing chaos damage, but in 3.26, the Occultist got a change that was added late in the patch notes, so this wasn't even in the original draft. And this is an important change to Vile Bastion that makes maximum energy shield be increased by chance to block spell damage. So by taking this node and investing into spell block, these builds are getting around 75 to 78% increased energy shield on top of having spell block. So they're able to scale 2 layers at the same time. And when you factor in Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice, that means they're scaling multiple layers of defense and their damage at the same time. That's triple dipping. But wait, I haven't even mentioned the most important component in all of this. Whispers of Infinity. A brand new unique amulet in 3.26, and talk about the stars aligning. You couldn't even make this up. This is the perfect item for this build. It's in a slot that would usually be providing gem levels for a spell build, but this spell doesn't need gem levels, it needs maximum energy shield. And what does this unique have in abundance? That's right, flat energy shield. And a huge amount of flat energy shield at that. But even more important than that, skills cost energy shield instead of mana or life. This means that you can use Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice with Chaos Inoculation, because that life cost now costs energy shield instead. Therefore, that self-hit of Chaos damage no longer deals any damage to you. You're able to completely bypass the downside of the skill with this combo. And that means a full focus on scaling energy shield, and the massive defensive benefit that comes alongside Chaos Inoculation. This enables the use of a pure energy shield body armor, making use of those new, more powerful base types that were added in 3.25. And that's because instead of being forced to try to obtain some levels of mitigation against physical damage using hybrid body armors, or perhaps having to use a specific unique body armor potentially double corrupted for gem levels, these builds are instead just all in on stacking energy shield. You don't need to be too concerned with mitigating physical damage when you have a mammoth amount of effective hit pool. And so, Whispers of Infinity is the build enabling item. Without this item, without this mechanic, the whole build crumbles. And you can see that. Literally 100% of builds playing Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice are using Whispers of Infinity and Chaos Inoculation. But even though this is the most important piece of this puzzle, it's not the only piece, as there are other supporting factors at play. We already discussed the change to the Occultist ascendancy. It's also worth mentioning the Elementalist too, as there are a decent chunk of Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice builds choosing this ascendancy over the Occultist. These are mostly poison versions of the build, making use of the new golems, because you gain a lot of generic damage and damage over time multiplier scaling from both Flame Golem and Chaos Golem, but perhaps more importantly, Stone Golem now provides increased defenses, so you can gain a big chunk of increased energy shield from Stone Golem, similar to how the Occultist gains a large amount of increased energy shield from Vile Bastion. And this means that the Elementalist can also scale offenses and defenses at the same time using Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice. Now, one of the other major supporting factors is on the offensive side of things. This goes back to the defenses discussion from earlier and the fact that self-cast builds need to be standing still to cast their spells, and that was a problem in past leagues. Part of that problem is cast speed. Now, GGG did attempt to address this issue in 3.26. They improved cast speed on Arcane Surge, and they also added a more cast speed multiplier to the Transfigured Righteous Fire. But unfortunately, the Forbidden Rite builds can't make use of RF because RF stops on 1 life and they're using CI, so they always have 1 life. However, cast speed has been solved by another new unique item, the Coiling Whisper unique ring, which provides a somewhat easy way to gain Soul Eater stacks, providing up to 225% increased cast speed at maximum stacks. This is incredible damage scaling, but it's also strong defensively. The faster you cast, the faster you can move, the less you get hit. And when we're talking about those dangerous tier 17 map modifiers, this is extremely beneficial. And that is pretty much it. The story of how all of the pieces just kind of fell into place for one of the strongest emerging builds this league, Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice. Will it make it into patch 3.27 in its current form? I'd say very, very unlikely. So if you intend to play it, do it this league, and if you're already playing it, enjoy it while it lasts. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.